General Vincent Coglianese of the United States Marines. If you received the program, have a seat. If you received the program, on the back you can read a condensed version of Major General Coglianese's outstanding career and accomplishments. It is an extreme honor and privilege to have him here with us today. So let me explain to you how we just got to receive this honor of our keynote speaker. Major General Coglianese grew up on the mean streets of Spring Lake, Monmouth County, New Jersey. He is in a he was from a tight-knit Italian-Irish family of 11, which includes his parents and 8 siblings. Before he entered the U.S. Marine Corps and rose to the rank of a Major General, he was known in the neighborhood, or hood as they say in Spring Lake, as Vinny. In the 3rd grade, Vinny became great friends with Eatontown's former councilman, Mark Regan, another guy raised in the hood of Spring Lake. These two did what most hoodlums of Spring Lake did. They joined the Boy Scouts, and they were altar boys together. Also, like most New Jerseyans, Vinny grew up listening to Bruce Springsteen, and he even worked on the Asbury Park Boardwalk. Vinny and Mark went through high school together and continued a semester in college. Vinny was Mark Regan's bodyguard growing up, and he is now protecting all of us as a Major General in the U.S. Marines. There is a maximum of 60 generals in the Marine Corps at any given time. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the privilege and honor to have one of those officers here today. I introduce to you Major General Vincent Coglianese to come up to the podium.
Okay, that's the best introduction I ever got. I know my Marines would love to hear that Vinny from the Hood story, so. But it was true. And those Boy Scouts are a lot sharper than Mark and I ever were before we were kicked out. Hey, Mayor Connolly and distinguished guests, and especially the veterans. It's just good to be back in New Jersey, not far from where I grew up. I'm honored to be here with you in Eatontown to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Memorial Day, a day to remember and honor the service and the sacrifice of our nation's finest and bravest. President John F. Kennedy said, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. He believed words were merely noise unless accompanied by action. This is why we, the many, here and across the nation, pause to honor those who gave up everything in defense of our country, so that we may live in a free and open democracy. Only a small fraction of our population takes up the responsibility of keeping us safe and our liberties intact. So, how do we properly thank those who have done so much to ensure this country's prosperities and freedoms are secure? Since General George Washington commanded the Continental Army, over 42 million Americans have worn the cloth, serving their nation. 1.1 million died defending her, and another 1.5 million were wounded. Memorial Day is an important day for Americans to honor and remember those who gave their lives to protect this country. This day has its roots in the aftermath of the Civil War. 600,000 had died in a momentous struggle to determine what type of nation we were going to become. Following the conflict, communities, towns across the country, north and south, struggled to cope with the tremendous losses we endured. As Americans, they took it upon themselves to decorate graveyards and town squares to honor those who lost and ensure their memories were not forgotten. These many human acts of remembrance were then coalesced into a national day of remembrance, known as Decoration Day, and set as the date by the President's decree on 5 May 1868. The first observance of this was held then on the 30th, when all the graves in Arlington and the National Cemetery were decorated, and flowers and flags were put in place, and it still happens today. It wasn't, however, until World War I when the commemoration expanded to cover all Americans lost in the battlefield. Furthermore, it was officially named Memorial Day 1967. The final event that cemented the modern culture of Memorial Day in America was in 1968 when the Congress passed the Uniform Holiday Act, designating Memorial Day as the last Monday in May rather than May 30th that had previously been observed. This past January 31st marked the 50th anniversary of the start of the Battle of Hue City during the Tet Offensive. North Vietnamese troops and communist guerrillas captured most of the city at the start of a surprise offensive. And your Marines fought street by street, house by house, to drive the enemy back. Initially, the U.S. limited artillery and airstrikes on Hue City. So the Marines used tear gas and recoilless rifles to take the narrow streets. 3 U.S. Marine battalions consisting of 2,500 men attacked and soundly defeated 10,000 entrenched enemy troops in a city that was considered Vietnam's spiritual and cultural center. During these 3 weeks of intense urban fighting, 142 Marines died, 857 were wounded. The Vietnam War tested our country as never before. Young Americans rightfully questioned the mission and the end state in Vietnam. Those who went where they were told knew they served for each other, for the families, just like the veterans before them and since, including those who served in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan, to name a few. And now, after almost 17 years of the global war on terrorism, more than 2.5 million service members have been deployed. More than 81,000 have deployed more than once, and 6,941 have given their lives. Not since Vietnam have we suffered casualties to compare. This speaks volumes of the level of bravery and courage demanded of the men and women who serve today. Everyone who has served in combat remembers returning home and the long-awaited moment when their airplane or ship entered U.S. territory. The feeling's electric. When our veterans got off the plane, when our Vietnam veterans got off the plane, and when they returned home, they didn't receive a warm welcome that they deserved. There were no grand welcome home ceremonies and few, if any, parades. They even built their own memorial so we would not forget. They took care of each other during the war, and still today, the Vietnam veterans have a special kinship with each other. Could the Vietnam veterans just raise your hand if you're here? Hey, welcome home. In 1994, I was serving at the Marine Corps as the Marine Corps representative at the Merchant Marine Academy on Long Island, not far from here in Kings Point. While there, I befriended a former well-decorated Marine, then a Navy chaplain. He had flown helicopters in Vietnam. I discovered he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross during his time in Vietnam with 52 air medals. One day I asked him why he hadn't shared his insights of Vietnam with the midshipmen who were eager to learn. He explained that when he returned from Vietnam, full of stories about the war, his best friend, his own brother, had told him, "We don't want to hear about the war." He knew then that if his brother didn't want to hear about the war, that neither did the American public. Ronald Reagan said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day, we'll spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States when men were free." We don't take many oaths in our lives. Many only swear an oath when they get married. That's it. Few take an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. We in the military today are blessed with the support of the nation. Regardless of the opinions of the conflict, our service members have been welcomed home with respect and flags waving. I believe that's because our Vietnam veterans are the driving force behind the display of unconditional support. It's daunting to think the tremendous sacrifices our veterans have made, physically and emotionally. Behind each one of these heroes is a family that is also marked with the scars of battle. The death of a service member does not affect just one life, but entire families. Coming back to the first national commemoration, the former Union General and future President James Garfield gave the following remark to 5,000 people who had just finished decorating then 20,000 graves at Robert E. Lee Arlington Farm. He said, "We do not know one promise these men made, one pledge they gave, one word they spoke, but we do know they summed up and perfected by one supreme act the highest virtues of men and citizens. For love of country, they accepted death, and thus resolved all doubts, and made immortal their patriotism and their virtue." James Garfield. Memorial Day has no political affiliation. All parties are represented here. We must never forget and vow to honor the memories of those who didn't leave the battlefield. Spend today reflecting on their service and their sacrifice, and live each day with gratitude for them and the precious gift they afforded us. As a nation, we made a promise to honor our fallen, and we must keep that promise. Thank you for being here today, and more importantly, teaching your children, our nation's greatest gift, the importance of this day. God bless, and Semper Fidelis.